What's up, y'all? It's Tony and Matt from Bro Pilots, and today we're going to show you how we fly for free.
Before we do that, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to us on YouTube, and check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/bropilots. Supporting us there will help us continue to bring you awesome aviation content every week. Also, if you head over to twitch.tv/bropilots, you can check out our new channel there. Me and Tony will be streaming top-notch quality flight simulator content, and if you want to see that, make sure to give us a follow.
Okay, so we don't actually fly for free, but kind of. And the way we do this is through something called a leaseback. So what's a leaseback? Airplanes are expensive, and to have a flight school, you need to have a lot of them. When a flight school doesn't want to buy a bunch of airplanes and keep up with them, what they do is something called a leaseback. This is when they literally rent airplanes from owners to be used on their flight lines as if it's their own. So the student pays the flight school to rent the plane, and then the flight school pays you.
So where do you start? Start by calling flight schools, figure out who does leasebacks, who doesn't, and see what kind of fleets they actually have. Of the schools that do leasebacks, find out what kind of airplanes their fleet consists of and if there's any gaps in their offering. This is also a good time to discuss how they normally split the profits with the owners, so you can compare one school against another. One of the most cost-effective ways to buy an airplane is to buy it with partners and just split the costs. Once you decide on the kind of plane you want, check out sites like Trade-A-Plane, Wingswap, Barnstormers, or Facebook, or whatever. Planes are everywhere, if you think about it.
Some of the most common rental airplanes are a Piper PA-28 and a Cessna 172. Find something that's in good shape and ideally cheap to maintain. All of the maintenance costs normally fall on you, the owner, so the less of your profits that go towards this, the better. As far as avionics go, we recommend a good mix of steam and glass. We did a Garmin G3X Touch, but for some reason students and instructors seem to shy away from a full glass panel. We recommend a nice GPS like a Garmin 375 or 650 with twin G5s. You probably don't need to put in an autopilot unless you're specifically renting to people who fly a lot of cross countries and not student pilots who are just learning.
A good paint job is not a necessity, but it does contribute to how a student and their family might feel about the airworthiness of that particular airplane. In essence, it's a proxy for how safe am I going to be in this plane. If it looks bad, then maybe you want to consider painting it. If it's not the prettiest but isn't terrible, it probably isn't preventing people from renting it because after all, this is a rental plane and it sort of comes with the territory. That being said, a cool paint job definitely doesn't hurt. But if you are considering painting it, keep in mind it'll probably get beat up with students and instructors flying it daily.
So this is the payoff. When other people rent the airplane, they're essentially paying for the fuel you use when you're flying it.
Let's take a look at a very simple example. Keep in mind that real life costs will vary depending on where you live, as well as tons of other factors, but this example is pretty realistic. You and two friends buy an airplane and get it into good airworthy condition. You've each put in about $15,000. You put it on the line at a flight school for $160 an hour, and it flies around 50 hours a month, which equals a little less than 2 hours a day. Pretty reasonable. At the end of the month, your plane has brought in about $8,000. Now let's start subtracting expenses. If fuel is $5 a gallon, and most flight school planes burn at worst 10 gallons per hour, then you're burning around $50 an hour just to keep the engine running. Plus, let's add a little bit extra to that number just to account for things like oil burn, tire wear, and other consumables. So all in all, let's say it costs about $60 an hour to operate your airplane. So if we take that $60 and multiply it by how many hours your plane flew that month, which was 50, it costs you roughly $3,000 to operate your plane that month. So we'll subtract that from our total of $8,000, which leaves us with $5,000. Now we have to give the flight school their cut of the revenue based on your agreement. And let's say that you agree to an 80-20 split, so the flight school gets $1,000, which leaves you with $4,000. Let's also assume that any given month you'll do about $1,000 worth of maintenance, so now you're left with $3,000. So now you've paid for your fuel, given the flight school their cut, and fixed anything that's broken on the plane in this past month. Then you take that $3,000 that's left and split it amongst the three owners, leaving each of you with about $1,000 for the month. You can take this money and use it to pay for your own flight training, thus making it free, or you can use it to start paying off your initial $15,000 you put in. If you do that at $1,000 a month, you'll repay your initial $15,000 in a little over a year.
If it does well, you're potentially not just flying for free, but eventually repaying your initial investment. Then when you're ready, when you go to sell the plane, you take the money you put in initially and put it towards your new plane. So yes, you've put in a significant initial investment, but when you sell, you potentially have actually made some money.
So here are some tips we've learned along the way. Stay involved with the maintenance. The best thing you can do for your plane is to make sure it has a reputation for being a solid, airworthy airplane.
So when you do fly, pay for your own fuel and add like 10% for other consumables. That way you're not dipping into your own profits when you're flying.
Don't expect to make tons of money up front. After all, things break, especially on older airplanes. Flight school airplanes fly a lot. And so especially up front, you're going to spend a lot of time fixing all the squawks that come up. And always make sure you're putting a little bit away towards the overhaul that you might have to have or any other unexpected expenditures.
Now there is just a little bit of a downside to this process. When you go to sell your airplane, most people want to know if it's been a rental or not because most rental airplanes get a bit abused. So this whole leaseback option isn't just a theoretical. This is how we fly for free right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications for when we release new videos.
Also follow us on Instagram at bropilots_aviation. Check us out at twitch.tv/bropilots for streaming content, and we'll see you up there in the sky.